I'm Rebecca. Welcome to the April edition of SMA Sketch Club. This month we are going to be creating a drawing of buildings from a ground view perspective, which means that we're looking from the ground up at the buildings and the sky beyond that. For this month's Sketch Club, you're going to need your booklet. You can also download this online. There's a link. You'll need a pencil, and you're going to need colored pencils. And we're going to be thinking about buildings today. But before we get started with our drawing, let's look at 3 works of art that are in our collection. So the first work of art I want us to look at is Fremont Ellis's The Clapboard House. And when we look at it, we can see that the house is very close to the artist. There's not a lot between the house and you, the viewer. And he also has chosen a really interesting angle. His perspective is from like the left corner. He's standing almost at the corner of the house, and so as you're looking at the painting, we're looking at the long front side of the painting. So artists can make interesting choices. You don't always have to draw your building straight on. Our next painting that we're going to look at is by Oscar Burninghouse, and it's called Guadalupe Church Plaza Taos. And whereas Ellis was really close to his subject, Burninghouse is standing way far away. So we see lots of land between the artist, where he's standing to paint, and the church. And he's also, it appears that he's up in the sky. And so maybe he's on a hill. So again, that's a choice that the artist made to depict that work of art. The last painting we're going to look at is by Joseph Henry Sharp, and it's called An Old Street Taos, Kit Carson Street. And it's still in Taos today. If you go to Taos, you will definitely travel up and down Kit Carson Street. But at this time, when Sharp was painting it was a dirt street. And when we look at the painting, is he standing in the middle of the street, looking down the street? No. He's off on a corner. We can see that he's on the curb, and he is looking at an angle. So his perspective that he chose to depict the street is, again, an artist's choice. And so we're going to make some choices with our drawing. We're going to be flipping over to the very back side of your sketchbook, and we are going to draw 4 buildings that maybe are familiar buildings in your life, and we're going to do it from a ground view perspective. So when it's finished, it's going to feel like you're looking up at the buildings and the sky above the buildings. It's going to be fun. Come join me. All right, to get started, we're going to need your template. It's on the back of your sketchbook, or you can download it. And you'll notice that it's very faint gray. And that's because we don't want any of this really showing once we're done, but this will help guide us through. It looks a bit like a pizza. Can you see that there's little triangles? And that every other triangle has the word sky written in it. And so that's telling us that those are not the triangles that we're going to put the buildings into. We're going to put them in the empty buildings. So to begin, we are going to draw lines that indicate the tops of buildings. And you can see that sometimes, for this one, I made a very tall building. So if you want a very tall building, it's going to go more toward the center of the circle. If you want a very low building, it would be more toward the outside of the circle. And so you're going to do that from line to line in those triangles that do not have the word sky in them. So once we've done that, we're ready to put the walls on our building. And because we're creating a ground view perspective, our buildings will not look square the way that you would anticipate a building to be. And that is because things that are further away get narrower as we draw them. And so we are just simply going to trace the line, that gray line from the top of the horizontal line that you drew. We're just going to trace the gray line out to the outer circle. Pretty simple. And so you can see they look a little like rectangles, but not. But that's okay. It's all going to make sense at the end. All right, so once we have drawn the walls of our buildings, now we get to decide what buildings they are. And I want you to think about what kind of buildings surround you in your community. And we looked at some examples of artists that lived in Taos. We saw an example of a home and a church and also a street with multiple buildings, but really the street was the main thing. So let's think about buildings that surround you. Could it be your home, or maybe your school, or your church or a restaurant, there's lots of different buildings. So as we begin to put the tops onto our buildings, you can think about what the buildings around you have that make them look like familiar places in your community. So let's get started with that. I'm going to add a dome because my church has a dome on the top. But there's also some churches that have steeples, kind of pointed arrows that stick up way up high in the sky. I also take my car, unfortunately, to a place that is very flat and has a big garage, so maybe a auto repair place. And then my house has a pointed roof, a pitched roof, and lots of houses do, so you might add a triangle to one of yours. And then, once you have that done, we get to add all those details that make a building interesting. So I want you to add doors and windows, maybe a garage door. And I would encourage you again to try to make each one of these buildings as different as you can from the next. So add all the details that your imagination can offer. And now comes the fun part. Now that we have our buildings drawn, we can add the color. And so this is where all of what we've been working on is going to start to make sense. Because now that we add the sky color and the color of the buildings, we really can see that ground view perspective that we're imagining we're laying on the ground around with these buildings looming up over us. And if we were looking up, these buildings would look thinner at the top. Just like if you're in a city and you look up at a skyscraper, it looks much thinner up at the top than it does down where you're standing. And then I want you to add your sky, whether it's a daytime, nighttime, what's up in your sky. Again, your imagination is your only guide. All right, so we have created a ground view perspective drawing of buildings, and you can see that the possibilities are endless. This is what I created. So I put clouds in my sky. You might put birds, maybe an airplane. That could be fun. But my friend created this one. I see some recognizable places to eat. But you could also get creative. Does your sky always have to be sunny? It could be nighttime. There could be thunder and lightning. I guess you would see the lightning. There could be lightning happening. Any kind of weather. Your potential for creativity in this is endless. So I can't wait to see what you do, and then we'll see you again next month.